Welcome to Herbally Yours, an adventure into the world of natural medicine. Here is your host, Dr. Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse who will help you take the leap to ultimate wellness.
Greetings, and thank you so much for joining me, Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, for another edition of Herbally Yours, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Herbally Yours brings you the latest information about the many facets in the world of natural living. Today, I am so happy to have as our guest Dr. Danielle Roberts, who is a DO, an MS, a practiced gymnast for 9 years, and up to a national level when she went on to become a fitness enthusiast. She has taught aerobics and has personally trained her way through college and medical school, graduating from Binghamton University cum laude with a degree in psychobiology and completing a dual degree in osteopathic medicine and clinical nutrition. She has studied many modalities, including trigger point injections, functional medicine, acupuncture, essential oil immunotherapy, Tai Chi, and holds certifications in chelation, IV, and Reiki. She's board certified in family practice and has served our communities as a physician, medical director, and hospitalist. And she is very proud of her co-development of XOSO, an international self-mastery program. Today, she will be sharing her insights about resilience, love, and health. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Danielle.
Thank you for having me, Ellen. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, let's go back in time and look at your long list of accomplishments and obviously a long-time interest in health and wellness. What put you on the path to become a doctor?
Oh, my goodness. Well, I guess there were key life experiences. I think most of us probably have these moments in our lives that kind of shape us and define us in certain ways. And there were a few key experiences, I think, that helped direct me onto that path. And I mean, I think one of them was gymnastics in general. Gymnastics was a big part of my life from 5 years old until 13. And I worked out 3 hours a night and competed on weekends. And, it was a passion of mine. I really had a goal to make it to the Olympics. And I experienced different ankle injuries were my worst. I had stress fractures and I had, tore the ligaments in my ankles a few times. And, around 9th grade or so I was on crutches for a year. And I had gone to physical therapists and things like that. And I think that was a key moment of recognizing, wow, these practitioners are helping me be able to continue to do what I love so much. Gosh, without gymnastics, my life was so different. It was such a huge part. So that was when I became interested actually in physical therapy, when they were able to kind of get me back and going, continuing to do what I love. That was my first interest in physical therapy. And then there were a few other key experiences. There was, there were some loved ones and some people very close to me in my life that struggled with addiction. So I really was very fascinated with understanding the mind-body connection and understanding more about how that worked so that I could better help them, better help myself. And I think a lot of these factors kind of all came together, really wanting to help the people that I love and to help myself be able to do the things that I love. So the more I explored that, I got into personal training after gymnastics and then teaching aerobics and I guess my fascination just grew and grew, and I wanted to be able to help more and more people and continued down the path towards medicine. I guess ultimately, I chose the path of medicine that I did because of some other experiences, but I think that's the foundation.
Well, right. So it just continued from your interest in health and physical fitness. Yeah. Tell us, what is psychobiology? You have a degree in psychobiology.
Yeah, psychobiology. It's really the combination of mind and body. So again, like I mentioned, I was really fascinated with understanding this connection, to really, I guess I don't know if everybody has like a burning question they pursue in their life. I really wanted to understand the influence of the mind and the influence and the, I guess, interaction between the mind and the body. So that's exactly what that was.
And you obviously have a penchant for going deeply into whatever your interest is, because you have such a long list of expertise.
Yeah, well, I definitely, I think the body's magnificent, and I definitely wanted to understand it as best I could.
And you certainly have gone into it. So why is this topic interesting to you in terms of health and wellness? Like, what would you like listeners to get out of it?
Well, the topic that I originally spoke to you about was how pain and stress, the intentional use of pain and stress in creating health and vitality. And I think this topic in particular right now, with everything that's going on in our society, with what's going on with COVID, what's going on in my professional life, what I've experienced in the past 4 years through a bit of a defamation campaign, has highlighted for me that in our culture, we have a real aversion to pain and to stress, and it's making us weaker. It's making us less healthy. And I'm happy to explain and elaborate, but that's really, in watching what's happened specifically in our society with COVID in the past few years, I think it's very important that we understand the place of pain and the place of stress in our lives. They're very important aspects of being alive, being human, being in a human body. And I think the more we avoid them, the weaker we get, the more unhealthy we get, the more imbalanced we get. And it's very important that we can understand how to use these things intentionally to create more health, more mental strength, more vitality, more joy, all of those things.
Well, I'm sure that that's something that my son, Titus Comet Kahutek, often discusses, and I think that's why he's been over the last couple of years. He's a personal trainer also, par excellence, and he's been very involved in swimming in ice cold water where they live up there in Seattle, and they just go in swimming like every day. And when he discusses it, it has to do with neuroreceptive enhancement. Yeah. Besides the fact that he's actually gotten to enjoy it. And he said even the mental capacity of knowing it's going to be cold and overcoming that. And then, the physical training aspects of doing that.
You can't see my face right now, Ellen, but I'm smiling from ear to ear. Yes, 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 exactly. I'm a big fan of Wim Hof too. And he does, they call him the Iceman. And he does cold exposure. And there is a process, it's gradual, right? I mean, sometimes if you just take a cold shower, I've done cold showers for quite some time, but even just taking a cold shower, it can be anxiety inducing. And, especially if you just get out of a warm bed or you're tired or, whatever it is, but what it takes to mentally overcome that is just so wonderful for overcoming anxiety, building self-esteem, building mental strength. And Wim Hof has often reported in his classes, he does just specifically cold exposure, many people being able to overcome anxiety in short periods of time because they're able to build their mental strength. And they're able to recognize that they're kind of the boss of their body. They're in control of this process. And then, you bring the body along, like you said, receptively, if that's a word, you bring the body along neurologically. Originally, if you live in Florida, sunny Florida, where you are, Ellen, the body might be used to warmer temperatures and things like that, but you can slowly start to bring it along to a place where in the beginning you take cold showers and it's like freezing and maybe your fight or flight goes off and you have, it's hard to control the anxiety or the fear response the body has when it feels the new sensation, but you learn how to breathe through it. You learn how to calm the nervous system, and you adapt the nervous system to the stimuli so that you start to be able to handle greater and greater stressful situations without throwing the body into an anxious state or something like that. And you recognize this is kind of I guess, in a lot of ways, a yogic stance too. With yoga, you put yourself in all sorts of uncomfortable situations and you breathe through it, because you're stimulating the vagus nerve, you're triggering your parasympathetic nervous system, and you're starting to train your nervous system to be able to handle stresses, discomforts, cold, things like that.
Well, that's not for everybody for sure, but from the yogic stance, I would say that's something I really practice, like regardless of what stress is coming into my field. I do not get thrown off. People always say that, but it has to do with like being in a calm center. But I have never really enjoyed cold. You're so right. And that's a big avoidance point to me. So that's when I don't even think I want to learn to like. That's another thing. Like you say, many people spend their day avoiding stress or pain.
Yeah. Well, you pick and choose your battles, You may not have a reason to overcome the pain of the cold right now. I mean, there may be other things you want to use your mental strength for. But I think if you just choose one area, if you do it, I mean, there's physical and emotional discomfort. I think that's an important distinction for people too. But if you choose one physical discomfort that you typically tend to avoid, and if it's the thing you avoid the most, the thing that you avoid the most, if you're able to overcome that, you get the most benefit.
That makes sense.
If it's something that is a slight discomfort and you just want to dip your toe in the water, that's great. I mean, it starts you down the path of recognizing, oh, right, I'm in control of this. And you start to build the belief in yourself that you can overcome it. And I think that eventually leads to physical mastery and personal mastery. When things like COVID happens and there's a lot of fears and a lot of uncertainty, you can start to lean into those fears. So this is more in the thought realm. There's physical discomfort, there's emotional discomfort, there's thought discomfort. But if there's things you don't understand, if you have the mental fortitude to push through a physical discomfort, that translates into the thought realm or the emotional realm, where if you feel uncomfortable, like, oh my gosh, I don't even know where to start with this whole COVID thing. I don't know what's true. I don't know what's not true. You start to be able to face the uncertainty of that and do the research, ask questions, ask uncomfortable questions that, maybe you didn't feel comfortable approaching, people that avoid conflict, people that avoid, there's all sorts of different avoidances we have in our life. And I think if you do it in one realm, it does start to translate into the other realms as well. And it's amazing how your life can open up.
Well, I want to remind our listeners that you are listening to Herbally Yours right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse. And we have all of our shows, including today's show with Dr. Danielle Roberts. We always have shows on our archive. So if you miss a show, you can visit our archive and listen to any previous shows. And also we have links there to contact our guests. And our guest today is Dr. Danielle Roberts, and her contact is Danielle at drdanielleroberts.com, or just visit our archive for a link. And she has a local Long Island phone number for our Long Island listeners, or of course anyone can call, and that's 516-480-1700, 516-480-1700. So now what you were talking about with self-exposure to discomfort and even going to the point of pain, which is what getting in cold water would be for me, wouldn't you be considered a masochist if you go out of your way to do that?
This is great. It's such a great question, Ellen. And the reason if people don't understand, well, let me make the distinction first. I think with masochism, this is something that people take pleasure in harming another person, where the intent is they actually delight in the destructive behavior or in actually harming a person physically, mentally, emotionally. And that's not the intent at all of intentionally using pain or stress. The intent in intentionally using pain and stress incrementally is to actually build health, vitality, happiness, strength. It's the exact opposite. Instead of harming or destroying something, you're actually building it up and making it stronger. And I think that's a very important thing to consider, through my experience in the last 4 years. And I haven't shared this with your listeners yet, Ellen. I think I've mentioned it to you, but I recently in the past 4 years had been outed in the media, so to speak. There was a defamation campaign that was created. And through that process, I was, I guess, quote unquote, canceled in the media. And as a result, they went after, for media and political reasons, they went after my medical license, and they revoked my medical license for something that had nothing to do with the practice of medicine, something that I chose to participate in my personal life. And that particular choice had to do with, helping other women to have a brand that they wanted to have done. So this process was painful for the women who wanted to have it done, but intentionally so. They wanted to be able to overcome the pain of this experience so they could build mental strength, so they could, prove to themselves that they could do it. And it was a very meaningful decision for all of the women involved to be part of something to help each other grow, help build each other up, help make each other stronger. But, certainly in the media, and certainly with, I think, our fears in this culture of pain and stress, they were able to easily make that something that I was, hurting or abusing women or masochistic in some way and taking some sort of pleasure out of that, which certainly is not the case. The whole point of everything we had done was to intentionally use pain or stress to make ourselves stronger. And gosh, I don't think I would have made it through the past 4 years had I not intentionally practiced for some of these things. I don't know that I would have had the mental fortitude to make it through. But I think that distinction is very important, because it's really important to understand if somebody's actually delighting in harming another person, or if their intention is to build each other up and become stronger, more viable, more resilient. So,
well, I guess that's two different things. One is if you are self-implementing these situations that might cause, and they're going to cause stress, or they're going to cause pain, versus someone else acting as the perpetrator of that force.
Yeah. And then I think the key there is consent. The key there is consent. Certainly in this war with Ukraine, there's no consent, and they're just going in and oppressing and hurting and doing that kind of thing. And in other situations, with a personal trainer, for instance, well,
that's a good example, because certainly I've worked with many personal trainers, and they definitely push you beyond your comfort level.
Yes.
That's part of the job of a personal trainer, because you wouldn't do that one more rep. At least I would not. Let's say I might do a certain number of reps, and, I'm in pretty good shape. I've been doing this my whole life, and I want to go to that next one, but I don't. But if my personal trainer is there, they will encourage you to, in fact, take that next step.
Exactly. And anybody who wants to be their best, anybody who wants to change and make it to the next level, whether it's physically, emotionally, in business, whatever it is, typically we hire a coach, and that coach helps to push us past our normal boundary, our discomfort, and help hold us accountable. So those are situations where you hire another person to literally, push you through the pain, push you through your discomfort. And it's intentional, and it's agreed upon.
Right. So, those are things like, another thing you might talk about in terms of like calorie restriction, because so many people find that when they go on a program to lose weight, that becomes very stressful and even painful, and they're in a fight with themselves.
Yes, yes. And this is a very interesting topic because I don't know, I've been playing with the body for so many years. And it's important to me that if I were to recommend something to a client or to a patient in the past, then that I would never ask them to do something that I wasn't willing to do. Right. So I've kind of experimented with all these crazy things to understand how they work. And calorie restriction is one that I think is so deeply, it's like ingrained in cold too. I guess all of these things, cold, calorie restriction, our bodies are wired for survival, So if you do start to calorie restrict or similarly expose yourself to cold, you have the neurological fight or flight response go off. And then it's being able to have the mental strength to coach yourself through it, and help yourself, remind yourself that you're doing this to get stronger and build more vitality. And with calorie restriction, actually, there's some tremendous benefits. Actually.
So let's talk about those. And those really have been amazingly well studied, both in humans as well as other species.
Yes. One of the studies with calorie restriction, and they do a lot, there's a ton of longevity studies at this point, but one of the ones that's reproducible and continues to hold up over time is calorie restriction. So if you restrict calories, of course, high quality calories, so high nutrient dense calories, but a lower amount over time, you tend to have a much higher quality existence and a much longer, your longevity is increased. So, that benefit alone is significant.
And that's been amazing. It's one of the only really truly proven what they call anti-aging therapies. Exactly.
Yeah. I think exercise has a bit of fountain of youth properties for sure. And, but certainly calorie restriction. And it's so controversial. And I think in some ways, because it does trigger our fight or flight, right? Or we see people that are, in our culture, sometimes if somebody looks too skinny, we're like, oh no, they must be sick, or, and we have a culture where people tend to be heavier because of all the sugar and all the calories and all of the things that I think our mindset and our perception of what our body needs is very skewed. We don't need nearly as many calories as we think we do.
That's for sure. Yeah. That's what that is. A really excellent movie about that called Super Size Me.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure if you ever saw it, but that was really well done in terms of that whole focus on, okay, so, if one low quality, horrible hamburger is good, like 3 is better. And it's just amazing. If one size soda is good, when that's double the size is better, which is exactly the opposite from the truth.
Yeah. And this was eye-opening for me because as a doctor, I've done all sorts of different types of diets. So there's there's low carb or gluten-free or dairy-free or an elimination diet, or, you do all of these things. And I built belief systems about, okay, well, I gluten causes inflammation in my body, and dairy, and it causes more mucus. And, I have had different experiences where different types of food has affected my body in specific ways. But then I did this process where I just did calorie counting. I just did calorie restriction. And I could have basically anything I wanted. So I could have the gluten, I could have the dairy, I could do any of those things, but I couldn't do it in excess. It would be small amounts. And it was very interesting, my experience, because very similar to what I would normally experience with eating gluten, like the extra inflammation or increased weight gain, I started wondering, could it just be that I was overeating? I couldn't, when I eat bread, I really like it. So I probably eat a little too much. But if I limit the amount and I keep my calories at a certain level, even having those types of foods, my inflammation stayed down, my weight stayed down, my performance levels were up. my cardiovascular performance, my flexibility. So it was very interesting and eye-opening to me because I had a whole bunch of beliefs about, different diets and things like that. So I don't know, something to explore for sure for each individual body.
So at this point in time, how are you working to help others? Do you have a private practice? Is it in Long Island, or, how can people learn more?
Well, as I mentioned, my medical license in New York was revoked. I am definitely working very diligently at appealing that decision and standing against it. So there is an Article 78 that will be happening this year to overturn their decision. But people can hear more about that if they go to my website and things like that. But in terms of helping, continuing to help people, my mission has remained the same. I feel it's so important to teach people the power and the strength of their mind, to help them understand that they're in control of mastering their body, to help them build that resilience, especially in a culture where we're being told, we need medicines or vaccinations or, all of these things to help protect ourselves instead of training our immune systems and making our immune system stronger. So even without a medical license, I'm teaching resilience classes. I'm teaching classes to help people master their bodies, not practicing medicine per se, not diagnosing, prescribing, treating, or, operating in any way, shape, or form.
I don't think that affects your ability to help people at all. You have a long list of all kinds of degrees and certifications. So, some people are what they call a health coach and they know nothing, and you know a lot. So, certainly you can work with people and share your vast array of knowledge.
Exactly. So so I'm in the process of teaching basically 10-week courses that bring people through these mental, emotional, and physical practices and help them better understand how to master their bodies and build the health, the vitality, the relationships, the experience of life that they want.
Well, thank you so much for being our guest today, Dr. Danielle Roberts.
And thank you so much for having me, Ellen. It was a pleasure. This was great.
And thank you, listeners, for tuning into Herbally Yours. We're produced in the studios of 90.3 WHPC, Nassau Community College, Garden City, New York. But we can be heard all over on iHeartRadio and many of the other podcast venues. For further information, email us at whpc@ncc.edu. This is your host, Ellen Kamai at naturalnurse.com, inviting you to join us next week for another edition of Herbally Yours. Until then, stay healthy.